Have you ever heard of a mind that just seemed to operate on a completely different level? I mean, someone who didn't just live in the 20th century, but seemed to be designing the 21st from scratch. Well, today we're talking about that guy, John von Neumann. His intellect was so powerful, it left even other geniuses totally speechless.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's not just some nice compliment. That's from a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, another one of the smartest people on the planet. And it really sets up the big question we're going to tackle. What in the world made von Neumann's mind so different, so ahead of its time?
So, to get a handle on the man who would literally build the architecture of our modern world, we've got to go back to the beginning. And let me tell you, his origin story sounds less like history and more like something out of science fiction.
Okay, this timeline is it's insane. At 6, he's doing complex math in his head for fun. By the time he's 8 years old, he's already mastered calculus, something that gives college students nightmares. And then at 23, he gets a PhD in math and a degree in chemical engineering at the same time. This isn't just being smart, this is a completely different kind of intellectual engine.
So with that kind of foundation, von Neumann wasn't just interested in solving existing problems. No, he wanted to go deeper. He set out to fix the very foundations of how we understand reality, starting with the language of math itself.
So at the turn of the century, believe it or not, mathematics was in crisis. There was this thing called Russell's paradox, and it was like a logical black hole threatening to tear everything apart. The question sounds like a riddle, right? But think about it. If the set contains itself, it breaks its own rule. And if it doesn't contain itself, it should be in the set. It was a total contradiction, and it put everything mathematicians thought was certain into question.
And then comes von Neumann. In his PhD thesis, of all places, he just solves it. And his solution was so elegant. He basically introduced a couple of new rules. First, he said sets have to be built from the ground up, which stops those weird self-containing loops. Then, he created a distinction between a set and a bigger idea called a class. And just like that, the paradox vanished. He literally saved math from itself.
And he wasn't done, not even close. At the same time he was fixing all of mathematics, he looked over at the brand new field of quantum mechanics, which was frankly a mess of weird and confusing ideas, and he gave it a solid mathematical language to stand on. The framework he built is still the one we use today. Just incredible.
So now his thinking takes a huge turn, from the purely abstract world of math to the terrifyingly concrete world of global conflict. During World War II, von Neumann's brain became one of the Allies' most powerful weapons.
And this is where his genius changes the course of human history. The plutonium bomb, the more complex one, needed a perfect sphere of explosives to crush a plutonium core with absolute precision. It was a physics and engineering problem of unimaginable difficulty. Well, it was von Neumann's math that proved it could be done and showed them exactly how. His calculations unlocked the atomic age.
But here's what is so wild. At the same time he's calculating the physics of mass destruction, he's also creating the mathematics of strategy itself. It's called game theory. He proved that for any conflict where one person's win is another's loss, like poker or a military standoff, there's always a single best strategy. He found a way to analyze conflict with math, and that idea would go on to define economics and Cold War strategy for decades.
So, he's helped define the atomic age? What's next? Oh, just laying down the blueprint for the entire digital age. This might be his biggest legacy, and it's one most of us never even see.
Okay, so get this. Every single smartphone, every laptop, every supercomputer on Earth, it's all based on this fundamental design. The first two parts make sense, a brain and a memory. But the third point, that was the revolution. The idea that the instructions for the computer could be stored in the same memory as the data it was working on. That simple concept is what makes computers programmable and flexible. He didn't just help build a computer, he designed the idea of the computer.
And if you want a perfect example of his insane foresight, here it is. Years before we even knew what DNA looked like, von Neumann, working in a world of pure math, created a design for a machine that could build a perfect copy of itself. He figured out the logic of self-replication decades before biologists discovered how life actually does it.
So after being a key architect of all this new world-changing power, nuclear, computational, von Neumann also became one of the very first people to see the incredible dangers that came with it.
Just look at this list. These aren't vague guesses, they are chillingly specific. He was talking about a technological singularity long before it became a sci-fi trope. And yes, you're reading that right. In 1955, he was publicly noting that burning fossil fuels was likely changing the climate. He saw the endgame of the technologies he helped create long before anyone else.
I mean, this quote from 1955, it could have been written this morning on Twitter. He knew that things like nuclear weapons and global communications would simply break the old ways of organizing the world. He saw it coming. We are living right in the middle of the maturing crisis he predicted almost 70 years ago.
So, what are we supposed to do with all of this? In the world that von Neumann helped build, what can a mind like his possibly teach us now?
I think this is his secret sauce. He never stayed in one box. His real genius was seeing the deep patterns that connect everything. The logic in math, the strategy in games, the physics of an explosion. He would take an idea from one field and plug it into a completely different one to create something new. This ability to cross-pollinate ideas, that was his superpower.
And really, that leaves us with a huge question for today. We live in a world that pushes us to become experts in smaller and smaller niches. But von Neumann's life shows us that maybe, just maybe, the biggest solutions, the most important breakthroughs, and the most critical warnings, they come from the people who have the courage to look up and see the whole board.